The sun was barely up, casting pale rays through the blinds and painting stripes across the worn wooden floor of my modest living room. The quiet was comforting, a rare moment of solitude before the day truly began. I was lost in thought, cradling a mug of lukewarm coffee when my phone vibrated against the table, jolting me from my reverie. It was a message from my son, Joshua. "Mum, is the $300 helping? I hope it's making things easier for you." The message was innocuous enough, but it stopped me in my tracks. "300?" I muttered, confused. My fingers flew across the screen, typing a response. "What $300? The reply was swift, a digital echo of the concern I imagined on his face. "The $3,000 I've been sending every month, isn't that what you've been getting?" My heart skipped a beat and a knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach. $3,000? I had only been receiving $300. A sense of foreboding settled over me, a storm cloud of unease. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something was clearly amiss. Joshua's subsequent messages betrayed his shock and anger. "We need to sort this out, Mom. Let's meet at the bank tomorrow. We'll get to the bottom of this." I nodded to myself, though he couldn't see me. "Okay," I replied. "I'll meet you there." I spent the rest of the day in a haze of worry, my mind racing with possibilities. Could it be a mistake? A banking error? Or was something more sinister at play? The following morning, the air was crisp and the sky overcast as I made my way to the bank. The walk felt longer than usual, each step heavy with anticipation. Joshua was already there when I arrived, pacing in front of the entrance, his expression tense. It reminded me of when he was a child, nervous before a big exam or a school performance. "Hey, Mom," he said, pulling me into a hug. "We'll figure this out." His reassurance was welcome, though I could sense the worry beneath his calm facade. Inside the bank, the fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over everything. We approached the teller together, explaining our situation. The bank employee nodded, typing furiously into the computer. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the only sound the soft clacking of keys and the distant hum of conversations around us. Finally, the teller turned the screen towards us, showing the transactions for the past few months. My heart sank as I saw the truth laid bare. Only $300 had been deposited each month. Joshua's face was a mask of disbelief, his eyes scanning the numbers as if willing them to change. "This isn't a mistake, it's a manipulation," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned to me, determination replacing the shock. "Someone's been diverting the funds. We're not letting this slide, Mom. We need to find out who's behind this." The ride home was silent, the weight of what we had discovered hanging heavily between us. I stole glances at Joshua, seeing the set of his jaw, the furrow in his brow. I knew he was considering the same possibilities I was. Could it be a banking error? A clerical oversight? Or was someone deliberately siphoning the money? Joshua broke the silence first. "Mom, do you think Richard could be involved?" His voice was hesitant, as if he didn't want to voice the suspicion that had been gnawing at us both. Richard, my husband of over 3 decades, had been distant lately. His warm demeanor had cooled, and his late nights at the office had become more frequent. There had been unexplained withdrawals, bills that didn't add up. The thought that he could be involved in something like this was terrifying. I didn't want to believe it, but it was a possibility we couldn't ignore. "I don't want to believe it," I replied, my voice trembling with emotion. "But we need to consider all possibilities." Over the next few days, Joshua and I turned our attention to uncovering the truth. We pored over bank statements, combed through phone records, and scrutinized every piece of financial documentation we could find. Each clue we unearthed pointed us in an uncomfortable direction, one that suggested someone close to us was betraying our trust. Richard had always been a good provider, a loving husband and father. But something had changed in the past year. He had become withdrawn, his temper shorter, and there were whispers of financial troubles that he had brushed off when I asked him. My mind replayed the moments of doubt I had dismissed, each one now a possible red flag. It was Joshua who suggested we confront Richard directly. "We need answers, and it's time we got them," he said, his voice firm with resolve. I nodded, knowing he was right. We couldn't let this fester any longer. The confrontation was nothing like I had imagined. It took place in the quiet of our living room, a space that had witnessed decades of laughter and love. Now it felt charged with tension and uncertainty, quickly replaced by resignation. Face when Joshua presented the evidence, "I didn't want it to come to this," was a mask of shock, his voice barely above a whisper. He told us a story of desperation, one I had never suspected. Business had been bad, worse than he had let on. Debts had piled up, ones he felt too ashamed to reveal. "I started diverting the money to pay off the debts, thinking it would be temporary," he confessed, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I was going to replace it before you ever found out." His words hung between us heavy and toxic. The betrayal stung, not just the financial betrayal, but the emotional one. Here was the man I had loved and trusted, who had chosen to deceive us rather than seek our help. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "We could have found a way together." Richard looked down, his expression a mixture of shame and regret. "I thought I was protecting you. I didn't want you to worry." The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Joshua was a rock, supporting me as I grappled with the implications of Richard's actions. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the trust that had been eroded. We attended counselling, both as a couple and individually. Richard was contrite, doing everything in his power to make amends. Slowly, painstakingly, we started to rebuild our life together. It was not an easy journey. There were days when the pain of betrayal felt insurmountable, when I questioned if we could ever truly move past it. But there were also moments of hope, glimpses of the man I had fallen in love with all those years ago. We began to communicate more openly, sharing our fears and insecurities. Joshua, ever the pragmatist, insisted on setting up a new bank account, one that he monitored closely. "Never again, Mom. We can't let our guard down like this." His words were a reminder of the lessons we had learned, the hard way. As the months passed, the sharp edges of our hurt began to dull. We found solace in the routines of everyday life, in the quiet moments spent together. We celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, each one a testament to our resilience and commitment. Life found a new rhythm, one that embraced the lessons of the past without being defined by them. The pain of the betrayal lingered, but it was no longer the focus of our daily lives. Joshua's visits, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now brought joy. In each of his smiles, in each of his hugs, I found forgiveness and a reminder of the resilience of family love. One crisp autumn evening, as we gathered in the living room, Richard, Joshua, and I, the air was filled with the soft music of reconciliation. We had survived the storm, our bonds tested but intact. "We're stronger now, aren't we?" I mused aloud, looking at the faces of the men I loved. Joshua nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "We are, Mom. We really are." And in that moment, I believed it. The journey had been arduous, filled with unexpected betrayals and even more unexpected forgiveness, but we had emerged from it changed, perhaps even better. This story, a tale of deception, resilience, and the redemptive power of family, was far from over. But as I looked at the faces of the men I loved, I knew we were ready for whatever came next. We had found strength in our vulnerability, and in that strength a promise of a new day. As life returned to normal, I found myself reflecting on the past, revisiting memories and moments that had shaped us. I thought about the early days of my marriage to Richard, the joy of bringing Joshua into the world, and the challenges we had faced as a family. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of our lives, woven together with love and resilience. I remembered the early years with Richard, the excitement and uncertainty of building a life together. We had met at a small printing company where I worked after graduating high school. Richard was charming, with a boyish grin and an infectious enthusiasm for life. Our courtship was a whirlwind of laughter and late-night conversations, a connection that felt as natural as breathing. It was a crisp autumn evening when Richard first asked me out. I had been working late, the office quiet except for the sound of my typing. Richard appeared at my desk, leaning casually against the cubicle wall. "Would you like to go to a pub with me?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I hesitated, unsure of what to make of his sudden invitation. "Is it normal to introduce yourself like that?" I wondered aloud, my tone teasing. Richard laughed, a warm, genuine sound that echoed through the empty office. Maybe not, but I thought it was worth a shot. I declined that night, citing a busy schedule and an early morning meeting. But a few days later, Richard approached me again, this time with a small paper bag in hand. "I've been looking for you," he said, offering the bag with a sheepish grin. Inside was a familiar handkerchief, one I hadn't even realized I had dropped. It was a precious memento from my mother, who had passed away not long ago. "You went to all this trouble?" I asked, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I thought it might be important to you," he replied, his sincerity evident. Feeling like I should thank him somehow, I decided to take him up on his offer to go to the pub. It was a decision that changed everything. The pub was warm and inviting, filled with the chatter of patrons and the clink of glasses. Richard and I found a quiet corner where we could talk without shouting over the noise. I had planned to leave early, but as the evening wore on, I found myself captivated by his stories and humour. He was surprisingly serious, admitting that he had only approached me initially because his friend had egged him on. "I didn't expect to actually like you this much," he confessed, a hint of embarrassment in his voice. I laughed, charmed by his honesty. "I suppose we can be friends then," I replied, feeling a flutter of excitement in my chest. From then on, we became regulars at the pub, meeting for drinks and conversation. Our friendship blossomed into something more, a connection that felt both inevitable and unexpected. About 4 months after we met, Richard and I officially started dating. It was strange even to me, considering how we had met. He was serious but a bit of an airhead. Perhaps that was part of what attracted me to him. We complemented each other in ways I hadn't anticipated, our differences creating a balance that felt just right. One evening, as we strolled through the park hand in hand, Richard stopped suddenly, turning to face me. "I promise to make you happy," he said, his voice earnest. "Is that a proposal?" I asked, caught off guard by the sudden declaration. He blinked, seemingly unsure himself. "Oh, was it? I'm not sure." I laughed, the sound carrying through the trees. "Well, that's fine, I guess." A few months later, we were married in a small ceremony, surrounded by family and friends. It was a day filled with laughter and love, the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. When I was 26, I gave birth to our son, Joshua. He was the spitting image of Richard, with the same mischievous smile and boundless curiosity. As he grew, Joshua proved to be a diligent student, inheriting Richard's knack for problem-solving and my love of learning. Watching Joshua grow into a young man filled me with pride. He graduated from a prestigious university and secured a job at a company that everyone envied. For me, who hadn't had much formal education, he was truly a son to be proud of. "From now on, I'll make sure you two can live comfortably," Joshua promised one day, his words a testament to the man he had become. I was happy to hear it, but for me, all I wanted was for him to find a good person and live a happy life. Richard often remarked on how much Joshua resembled me when I was young, especially from behind. "You think so?" I'd ask, amused by the comparison. "Well, it's his life now. He should live it as he sees fit," Richard would reply, a hint of wistfulness in his voice. After moving out on his own, Joshua would come back to visit regularly, especially during the holidays. Just seeing his face filled our home with warmth and joy. "I'm home," he'd call, stepping through the door with a smile that lit up the room. "Welcome back," I'd reply, pulling him into a hug. "Make yourself comfortable." That night, the three of us would catch up on each other's recent news, sharing stories and laughter. Joshua often spoke of his work, the big responsibilities he had taken on, and the possibility of a promotion. It was wonderful to see him thriving, his career taking off in ways he had only dreamed of. "I get the work stuff, but what about the other side of things?" Richard would ask, a teasing glint in his eye. "Is there a special someone?" The two of them were in high spirits, the camaraderie between father and son a joy to witness. Even though I knew Joshua would eventually find a good woman and get married, I couldn't help feeling a bit conflicted. It was the natural course of life, yet I cherished these moments together, knowing they would become less frequent. Joshua introduced us to the woman he wanted to marry when he was 27. Her name was Selena, and she was everything I had hoped for in a daughter-in-law. Petite and quiet, she carried herself with a grace that belied her strength. "It's nice to meet you," she said politely, extending a hand in greeting. "Selena looks a bit like you when you were younger, dear," Richard remarked, smiling at me. I nudged him playfully. "Hey, what are you saying? That's rude," Joshua sighed, a fond exasperation in his voice. "Could you two stop flirting right in front of me?" "Sorry," Richard said, grinning. "I just can't help it." Selena laughed softly at our exchange, her eyes twinkling with amusement. At that time, I didn't understand the hidden meaning behind Richard's words, the unspoken comparison that would later take on a new significance. "I'm all for the marriage," Richard declared. "Right, Deborah?" "Of course," I agreed. "There's no reason to object. Selena, please take good care of Joshua." It turned out that Selena and Joshua were colleagues at the same company. Apparently, Selena had been the one to approach him first. A bold move that endeared her to me even more. I heard this story from Selena herself one afternoon, the two of us sitting in the garden, enjoying the sun. After their marriage, Selena and Joshua often came to visit us. Apparently, it was Selena's idea to live close to our house. She wanted Joshua to be able to visit us easily, a gesture that spoke volumes about her kindness and thoughtfulness. Selena was truly a good person, and I was nothing but grateful that someone like her had chosen Joshua. However, changes were coming to this comfortable life. One day, I returned home to find unfamiliar shoes at the entrance. "Oh, is someone here?" I wondered aloud, slipping off my own shoes and making my way to the living room. There, I found Selena and Richard deep in conversation. "Selena, you're here," I said, surprised but pleased. "I found some delicious snacks and thought I'd bring them over for you to try," Selena explained, her smile warm and inviting. "That's so thoughtful of you," Richard said, gesturing for me to join them. "Why don't you have some too?" "Yes, I think I will," I replied, settling into the chair beside Selena. Her visits were becoming more frequent, always when I was out and Richard was home alone. I thought maybe she was looking for someone to talk to, a friendly face in a new environment. However, the frequency of Selena's visits to our house kept increasing. Moreover, it was always when I was out and Richard was home alone. At first, I thought nothing of it, attributing it to her desire for companionship. But soon I began to notice changes in her demeanor. She was no longer the warm, engaging woman I had first met. Instead, she seemed distant, her smiles more perfunctory than genuine. It was a subtle shift, one that I might not have noticed had it not been for the increasingly frequent visits. Selena would chat happily with Richard, but when I entered the room, her demeanor would change, her eyes flitting away as if avoiding contact. I began to wonder if I had done something to upset her. Was there something about me that she found off-putting? I decided to address my concerns with Richard, hoping he might have some insight. "Don't you think Selena has been a bit cold to me lately?" I asked one evening as we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. "Did I do something to upset her?" Richard looked thoughtful for a moment, then shrugged. "Aren't you overthinking things? Everyone has off days sometimes." His words were meant to reassure me, but they only added to my unease. It was true that we all have days where we aren't quite ourselves, But Selena's behavior seemed to be part of a larger pattern. As the weeks passed, her visits became more frequent and her behavior more erratic. She would arrive unannounced, bringing treats and engaging Richard in lively conversation. But when I joined them, her enthusiasm would wane. "Selena, welcome," I would say, trying to keep my tone cheerful despite the growing tension. "Oh, mother-in-law," she would reply, her voice distant as if she had just noticed me. "Excuse me for intruding?" Her words stung, a reminder of the growing divide between us. It felt as though she was building a wall, one that I couldn't breach no matter how hard I tried. Then came the accident, a moment of distraction that changed everything. I was carrying a basket of laundry downstairs when I missed a step, unable to see my feet beneath the pile of clothes. The world tilted and I felt myself falling, the impact jarring my senses. Pain shot through my leg as I lay crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, a searing reminder of my own vulnerability. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, dialing for help with trembling fingers. "Hello, I need an ambulance, please," I gasped, my voice barely audible over the ringing in my ears. I fell down the stairs at home. The paramedics arrived quickly, their efficiency a balm to my frayed nerves. I was whisked away to the hospital where the diagnosis confirmed my worst fears, a compound fracture in my left leg. Surgery followed, a blur of anesthesia and painkillers that left me feeling detached from reality. The first few days were a haze of discomfort and confusion, the hospital room a sterile bubble that seemed worlds away from the life I had known. The first person to visit me was Joshua, his concern etched into his features as he entered the room. "Mum, are you okay?" he asked, his voice a soothing balm to my anxiety. "I'm fine, Joshua," I assured him, though the pain was a constant reminder of my fragility. "Where's Dad?" "He hasn't come yet," Joshua replied, his expression darkening. "But he said he would visit soon." A month passed without a single visit from Richard. I tried to rationalize his absence, attributing it to work commitments or other responsibilities, but as the days stretched into weeks, I found it increasingly difficult to quell the doubt gnawing at my mind. When there was only a week left until my discharge, Richard finally showed up. I expected concern, perhaps even guilt, but instead he spoke words that pierced deeper than any physical pain. "I hear you're getting out soon," he said, his tone casual, as if we were discussing the weather. "Why did you have to go and break your bone at a time like this?" His words left me reeling, a sucker punch to my already bruised heart. "Because you broke your bone, Selena has been taking care of me in your place," he continued, his expression unreadable. "Taking care of you?" I echoed, struggling to process the implications of his statement. "Does Joshua know about this?" "Joshua has nothing to do with it," Richard replied, his voice dismissive. "Selena is coming because she's worried about me, even though she's pregnant." I couldn't understand why I was being blamed, why the man I had loved and trusted was treating me like a burden. "Anyway, when you get out, make sure you thank Selena properly," Richard added, his words a command rather than a request. The conversation left me feeling hollow, as if I had been emptied of all hope and optimism. The Richard I had known was gone, replaced by a stranger who seemed to relish my discomfort. My discharge from the hospital was bittersweet. I was relieved to be returning home, yet apprehensive about what awaited me. Richard's behavior had cast a shadow over everything, turning my once safe haven into a place of uncertainty. As soon as I stepped through the door, Richard began his demands anew. "Your fracture is healed now, right? Then get back to work already," he said, his words harsh and uncompromising. "Mother-in-law?" Selena chimed in, her tone saccharine sweet. "While you were in the hospital, I was the one taking care of father-in-law." "I'm grateful for that," I replied, my voice strained with the effort of maintaining civility. "Selena took care of everything around the house while you were slacking off," Richard added, his words a slap in the face. "Come on, bow your head and thank her." It felt like a nightmare, one from which I couldn't wake. As Richard tried to force me to comply, pushing my head towards the floor, a voice interrupted the madness. "What are you doing?" Joshua demanded, stepping into the room with a look of disbelief. He pulled Richard away from me, shielding me from further humiliation. "Mum, are you okay? What happened?" Richard suddenly told me to bow down to Selena. "Selena, what's going on? Explain yourself." Selena's tears were immediate, her words a performance of innocence. While mother-in-law was in the hospital, I was taking care of father-in-law, but he said I should be thanked for that. "Taking care of Dad? I never heard about this," Joshua said, his voice laced with skepticism. "Since we live nearby, I just came to help out a bit. I thought father-in-law might need some assistance, but I don't really understand what's happening either." Her words were a lie, a fabrication that obscured the truth of her manipulations. I was left reeling, unable to reconcile the woman before me with the one I had welcomed into our family. Joshua was a voice of reason amidst the chaos, insisting on getting to the bottom of the situation. "Mom, I want you to come stay at my place," he said, his concern evident. "I don't know what Dad might do to you if you stay here." I ended up staying at Joshua's house, grateful for the sanctuary he provided. Richard was muttering something as I left, but I didn't have the strength to decipher his words. I was too focused on putting distance between myself and the toxic environment that had once been my home. When we arrived at Joshua's house, Selena greeted us with open arms, her smile wide and welcoming. "Mother-in-law, I couldn't just leave her in that house with Dad, you know," Joshua explained, his words a comfort. "I'll be in your care for a while," I said, trying to push past the unease that lingered. I decided to keep some distance from Selena, as I couldn't get what had happened out of my head. However, contrary to my worries, Selena treated me kindly. I even started to wonder if what had happened before was just a dream. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Selena broached the topic of Richard. "Mother-in-law, is there anything you need? Why did father-in-law do such a thing to you?" Her question was a dagger, twisting in the wound of my betrayal. I was too scared of her to press the issue further, choosing instead to focus on healing. About a week after I came to Joshua's house, Richard came to visit. He looked haggard, a shadow of his former self, but his words were no less cutting. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "Won't you come back home?" he pleaded, his tone insistent. "I really can't manage without you. Please." He bowed his head deeply, a gesture that should have signaled contrition, but felt more like manipulation. Joshua and Selena were out, and I was alone in the house, torn between anger and confusion. "You won't do anything like before again, will you?" I asked, searching his face for sincerity. "No, and there's something I need to talk to you about," Richard replied, his voice urgent. "Something to talk about?" I echoed, curiosity piqued despite my reservations. "I'll tell you when we get home," he said, leaving me with more questions than answers. Thinking that I might finally understand why Richard had been acting so strangely, I decided to go back with him. Although it had only been about a week, the house felt nostalgic somehow. When we arrived home, Richard seemed tense, his movements jerky and nervous. Just as he was about to start talking, his phone rang. "Sorry, give me a moment," he said, stepping out to take the call. I waited patiently, my mind racing with possibilities. He returned after about 10 minutes, his expression dark and troubled. "I can't tell you after all," he muttered, almost to himself. "Why not?" "You're the one who brought it up," I pressed, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I can't accept this," Richard said, his voice strained. As I said this, Richard stood up and looked like he was about to leave. I instinctively grabbed his arm, desperation clawing at my insides. "I won't let go until you tell me what's going on." Richard shook off my hand, his eyes cold and distant. "This is the only way," he said, kicking my left leg, the one that had been broken. I felt pain as if it had broken again and collapsed on the spot, a gasp of agony escaping my lips. "Wait," I called, but Richard left without looking back. From that day on, Richard disappeared and stopped coming home. I immediately contacted Joshua, tears streaming down my face as I recounted what had happened. Fortunately, my leg wasn't broken again, but it still felt off, a constant reminder of Richard's betrayal. "Really, what is Dad doing?" Joshua asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "I don't know," I admitted, the words a bitter pill to swallow. "He said he had something to talk about, but what on earth is Dad hiding?" With Richard abandoning me, I had to start working, but my leg that Richard had kicked was in worse condition than I thought, and things weren't going well. Joshua reached out to help, his support a lifeline in the turbulent sea of uncertainty. "Mum, don't push yourself," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. "We still don't know why Dad changed like that, do we? And to think he would abandon you. Anyway, if you need anything, just tell me." From then on, I had to live frugally with what little savings I had. Fortunately, I still had a place to live, but even so, it was a tight squeeze every month. A few months passed, and I was somehow managing to get by on very little money. That's when Joshua came to visit me, concern etched into his features. "How have you been lately?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over me. "You look tired. Are you really managing okay?" I was startled by his perceptiveness, his concern a reminder of the love and support he offered. I had no choice but to tell him the truth. "I thought so," he said, a determined look on his face. "I don't want you living like this, scraping by. I'll take care of it, so don't worry about money anymore, okay?" "I can't trouble you like that," I protested, guilt gnawing at my conscience. "It's fine," Joshua insisted. "I'll send you money every month from now on." What a wonderful son I have. Even though he's about to have a child of his own, he's still looking out for me. "For now, can I hold on to your bank book?" he asked. "My bank book? Sure, that's fine," I replied, trusting him completely. From then on, Joshua started sending me money every month. However, this arrangement with the money transfers would lead me to discover an unbelievable truth. After Richard left, Selena started coming to our house frequently. "Mother-in-law, please don't feel down," she said, her words a balm to my frayed nerves. "I don't know why father-in-law left, but it's better to forget about such a terrible man. By the way, I had an idea. Why don't I dispose of father-in-law's belongings for you?" "Oh, but you're pregnant," I protested, concerned for her well-being. "I'm feeling good right now, so it's no problem. Leave it to me," Selena replied, her tone breezy. After that, Selena regularly came to take away Richard's favourite books, clothes, and other items, saying she would dispose of them. Before I knew it, the house felt much clearer, a physical manifestation of the emotional cleansing I was undergoing. This routine continued for several months until one day I got a call from Joshua after a long time. "Sorry, Mum. I've been so busy with work trips that I haven't been able to call. How's your leg?" "It's fine. Don't worry," I replied, grateful for his concern. "I've even started taking morning walks recently." "That's good to hear," Joshua said, his voice warm with relief. I was so happy that Joshua was not only helping me financially, but also showing such concern. I wanted to thank him again for the money he was sending. "Thank you for sending me $300 every month. My life has become much easier thanks to you." "Huh? What are you talking about? I don't know anything about $300, Joshua replied, confusion evident in his tone. "What?" I gasped, a sense of foreboding creeping over me. "But I've been receiving." I had indeed been receiving $300 monthly from him to support my living expenses. "I'm supposed to be sending you $3,000 every month. Something's not right here," Joshua said, his voice growing more upset. Joshua was clearly upset. Then Joshua made a suggestion. "Let's go to the bank together. We'll investigate what's going on." "All right," I agreed, my mind racing with possibilities. We headed to the bank with Joshua to find out what had happened to the remaining $2,700. "What? How is this possible?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. We had the bank check, and sure enough, only $300 was being deposited into my account each month. So where had the other $12,700 gone? What in the world is going on? Judging by Joshua's reaction, it didn't seem like he was lying. I don't mean to doubt you, but you really did transfer the money, right? I definitely... Wait a minute. How could I have made such a mistake? Joshua murmured, his brow furrowed in concentration. Actually, I had asked Selena to make the transfers, he admitted, a hint of guilt in his voice. It was right when I had a business trip coming up. So you mean she only sent me $300 and pocketed the rest? I asked, disbelief mingling with anger. That's the only explanation I can think of, Joshua replied, his expression hardening. If that's true, it's unforgivable. His expression changed from confusion to hatred in an instant. It seemed I felt the same way. I'll never forgive this. Let's get our revenge. You're right, Joshua agreed, his voice firm. Help me, Mom. And so we began our counterattack. But an unexpected outcome awaited us. We first went back home to devise a plan. The next transfer date is coming up soon, so let's set a trap, Joshua suggested. If it goes well, we should be able to catch her in the act. For now, I'll ask Selena to transfer $3,000 again. Let's follow her when she does, he continued, his mind working quickly. On the day of the transfer, Joshua and I were on the phone. I hate to ask, but could you handle the transfer to Mom again today? He asked, his voice casual. Sure, leave it to me, Selena replied, unaware of our plan. Oh, you look dressed up today, Joshua observed. I'm meeting some friends today, Selena said, her tone light. I see. Don't overdo it, okay? I know. Well, I'm off, Selena replied, hanging up the phone. It seemed Selena had left the house. Mom, did you hear that? Joshua asked, his voice tinged with excitement. Yes, I replied, feeling a surge of determination. I'll tell Selena for now, and we'll meet up later, Joshua said. Later, Joshua and I met up at the station, anticipation thrumming between us. According to Joshua, Selena had stopped by the bank and was now about to board a train. So where's Selena now? I asked, scanning the crowd. Looks like she's getting on the train, Joshua replied, his gaze fixed on the platform. What could Selena be doing that we didn't know about? I wondered aloud, my mind racing with possibilities. More importantly, where was she heading? We followed her at a distance, careful not to be noticed. 2 stops later, Selena got off the train. Her destination, an old 2-story apartment building. Mom, look, Joshua said, pointing towards the building. Selena entered the grounds of the apartment, disappearing into one of the units. Peeking around the corner, we saw her go into the farthest room. Joshua and I exchanged glances, our resolve firm. We approached the door, ready to confront whatever lay beyond. It seemed to be a thin-walled apartment, as we could hear voices from inside. I've brought it again today, Selena said, her voice carrying through the walls. Thank you, replied a male voice, one that sent a chill down my spine. I'm really sorry about this. It's okay. It's for the baby too, after all, Selena replied, her words a knife to my heart. It really is my child, right? The man asked, a hint of doubt in his voice. Are you still asking that? Selena replied, a hint of exasperation in her tone. I'm just double-checking. It was an unbelievable conversation, one that shattered my world. I glanced at Joshua beside me, seeing an expression I had never seen before. His hand was clenched so tightly that blood was seeping out. We continued to listen to what was happening inside the room, each word a hammer blow to the life we thought we knew. After about 30 minutes, Selena came out, her expression composed. Sorry, I have plans today, so I'll come again another time, she said, her voice casual. All right, take care, the man replied. We quickly hid in the shadow of the building, my heart pounding in my chest. I stopped Joshua as he was about to chase after Selena, my mind racing with possibilities. I have a good idea, I whispered, outlining my plan. I see. That would certainly be a fitting revenge, Joshua said, his expression softening. My plan was to first make contact with the man in the room. Are you ready? I asked, steeling myself for what lay ahead. We took a deep breath and rang the doorbell, ready to confront the truth. When the door opened and I saw the man's face, my mind went blank. No way, I gasped, disbelief washing over me. It was you, Dad. The person there was Richard, who had disappeared without a trace after leaving home. Why was he here? As Richard tried to close the door, Joshua stopped him. "Mom!" His words snapped me back to reality. "We're coming in, all right?" Joshua entered Richard's room and I followed, my heart heavy with dread. But when I got inside, I was even more shocked. The room was filled with Richard's belongings that Selena had taken from our house. In other words, Selena had been bringing them here when she took them from our home. So, Selena was bringing you money and to think you were her affair partner, Joshua said, his voice laced with anger. Richard remained silent, his expression unreadable. "Don't just stay quiet, say something," I demanded, my voice trembling with emotion. "How long have you been involved with Careful Not to Be Noticed?" 2 stops later, Selena got off the train. Her destination, an old 2-story apartment building. "Mom, look," Joshua said, pointing towards the building. Selena entered the grounds of the apartment, disappearing into one of the units. Peeking around the corner, we saw her go into the farthest room. Joshua and I exchanged glances, our resolve firm. We approached the door, ready to confront whatever lay beyond. It seemed to be a thin-walled apartment, as we could hear voices from inside. "I've brought it again today," Selena said, her voice carrying through the walls. "Thank you," replied a male voice, one that sent a chill down my spine. "I'm really sorry about this." "It's okay. It's for the baby too, after all," Selena replied, her words a knife to my heart. "It really is my child, right?" the man asked, a hint of doubt in his voice. "Are you still asking that?" Selena replied, a hint of exasperation in her tone. "I'm just double-checking." It was an unbelievable conversation, one that shattered my world. I glanced at Joshua beside me, seeing an expression I had never seen before. His hand was clenched so tightly that blood was seeping out. We continued to listen to what was happening inside the room, each word a hammer blow to the life we thought we knew. After about 30 minutes, Selena came out, her expression composed. "Sorry, I have plans today, so I'll come again another time," she said, her voice casual. "All right. Take care," the man replied. We quickly hid in the shadow of the building, my heart pounding in my chest. I stopped Joshua as he was about to chase after Selena, my mind racing with possibilities. "I have a good idea," I whispered, outlining my plan. "I see. That would certainly be a fitting revenge," Joshua said, his expression softening. My plan was to first make contact with the man in the room. "Are you ready?" I asked, steeling myself for what lay ahead. We took a deep breath and rang the doorbell, ready to confront the truth. When the door opened and I saw the man's face, my mind went blank. "No way!" I gasped, disbelief washing over me. "It was you, Dad?" The person there was Richard, who had disappeared without a trace after leaving home. Why was he here? As Richard tried to close the door, Joshua stopped him. "Mom," his words snapped me back to reality. "We're coming in, all right?" Joshua entered Richard's room and I followed, my heart heavy with dread. But when I got inside, I was even more shocked. The room was filled with Richard's belongings that Selena had taken from our house. In other words, Selena had been bringing them here when she took them from our home. "So Selena was bringing you money and to think you were her affair partner," Joshua said, his voice laced with anger. Richard remained silent, his expression unreadable. "Don't just stay quiet. Say something," I demanded, my voice trembling with emotion. "How long have you been involved with Selena?" "Hey, the first time I had a relationship with her was right after she got married and came to visit us," Richard confessed, his words a punch to the gut. "Selena was the one who made the first move," he added, his voice devoid of emotion. "Then why did you leave home?" I asked, desperation tinging my words. "Selena was blackmailing me. She said she'd reveal everything if I didn't do as she said," Richard replied, his voice filled with regret. At this point, I remembered something. "Was this what you were trying to tell me before you left home?" I asked. "Yes, that's right," Richard admitted, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "It was about Selena's pregnancy." "Joshua," I said, turning to my son, "to think that Selena's baby isn't mine." "I've been such a fool," Joshua said, his voice a mix of disbelief and anger. I couldn't find the words to comfort him. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too fresh. "I'm sorry," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "What I've done is unforgivable." Richard apologized to Joshua, but Joshua looked like he was about to hit Richard. "Joshua, this man isn't even worth hitting. We'll make sure he's punished, but before that, let's use him." "Richard is the worst, of course, but we need to make that woman see hell." "Richard, come to the house tomorrow," I instructed, my voice firm. "Of course, you know what will happen if you try to run away, right?" "I understand," Richard replied, his voice resigned. "Joshua, let's go home for now. The real show is tomorrow," I said, turning to my son. And so, we left Richard there and went home, our minds reeling with the implications of what we had discovered. "Mum, you said the real show is tomorrow. But what do you mean?" Joshua asked, his curiosity piqued. "We'll invite Selena to the house tomorrow and expose everything there," I explained, my mind working quickly. That's why I told Richard to come too. The next day, Richard came to the house as promised. We had let him wait in the bedroom until the right moment. Then our target arrived with Joshua. "I heard you had something important to discuss today," Selena said, her tone light and unconcerned. "That's right," I replied, my voice steady. "That's why we asked you both to come." Selena, knowing nothing, acted as usual. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. First, I brought up the money transfer issue. "By the way, I heard from Joshua about the money transfers. Do you know anything about that?" "Huh?" "I don't," Selena replied, her expression feigning innocence. "That's strange," I said, meeting her gaze. I gave Joshua a look, signaling him to continue. "I asked you to transfer $3,000 to my mom every month, didn't I?" Joshua asked, his voice calm but firm. "But it seems only $300 was being transferred to her. What happened to the remaining $2,700? "I'm sorry," Selena said, her voice suddenly small. "I really needed it." "What did you use it for?" Joshua pressed, his expression hardening. "There was a bag I really wanted," Selena replied, her words a poor excuse for her actions. "But it wasn't just once or twice, was it?" I interjected, my voice sharp. "I thought I wouldn't get caught," Selena said, her voice trembling. I couldn't believe she could lie so brazenly. I couldn't help but sigh, the weight of her deceit pressing down on me. "To think you were such a despicable woman," I said, my voice filled with disappointment. "You can come in now," I called, my voice steady. At my words, Richard, who had been looking down, entered the living room. We heard everything from him, including how you were giving this scumbag money. "To think you'd have a child with your husband's father," I said, my voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "Wait a minute," Selena protested, her voice rising in panic. At this point, I showed her something and said, "These are divorce papers. Sign them." Joshua and I had prepared the divorce papers the day before. "Selena, you sign here too," I instructed, my voice firm. "That's what you were planning anyway, right?" "I never," Selena began, but I cut her off. "If that wasn't the case, you wouldn't have had a child with another man," I said, my voice unwavering. "There's no use trying to argue. What you two did is clearly adultery, so we'll be demanding a hefty compensation. There's also the money you stole from my transfers to Mom. You'll pay it all back. And just so you know, we won't forgive you even if you apologize," Joshua added, his voice cold. "Why don't you two go back to that dirty apartment together?" I said, my voice a final dismissal. We made them sign the divorce papers and kicked them out. Richard was quiet, but Selena was making a fuss right until the end. What a stupid woman. If she hadn't chosen Richard, she could have lived a happy life without any worries. "Joshua, I'm okay," I said, turning to my son. I was shocked at first, but now I feel kind of refreshed. We still have things to do after all. "I'll follow Joshua's lead and just do what needs to be done," I said, my resolve firm. The day after we kicked them out, we went to file the divorce papers and consult about claiming compensation. It took some time to gather clear evidence, but we were able to successfully claim compensation from Richard and Selena. Of course, they couldn't pay it all at once, so we allowed them to pay in installments. Later, we heard through the grapevine that Richard had quit his job around the same time he left home. Apparently, it was because he was overwhelmed by Selena's threats. About 2 months after our divorce, Richard suddenly came to the house. "Could you help me a bit?" he asked, his voice a shadow of its former confidence. "At this rate, I can't make ends meet." "Do you realize how stupid you sound?" I replied, my voice laced with disbelief. "There's no way I would help you after we've divorced. If you don't want me to call the police, you'd better leave." After that, Richard left, looking dejected. "Oh, Dad came to your place, Mom?" Joshua said, his voice filled with surprise. "Selena came to mine too," I replied, a wry smile on my lips. Apparently Richard and Selena are living together, but Richard has become like a machine that only does what Selena says. Moreover, he's still unemployed. I'm curious to see what will happen to them from now on. Since then, Joshua and I have been living together in our house. Joshua says he's had enough of marriage, but I feel like our bond has deepened even more than before. I'm sure the rest of our lives will be bright. The journey had been arduous, filled with unexpected betrayals and even more unexpected forgiveness, but we had emerged from it changed, perhaps even better. As I looked at the faces of the men I loved, I knew we were ready for whatever came next. We had found strength in our vulnerability, and in that strength a promise of a new day.